I'm Mike Costello, and I'd like to talk to you in the next few minutes about embracing diversity. In our lives today, there is tremendous diversity, and so often the differences between persons, between circumstances and situations, cause a lot of us anxiety. And as we see the differences between us, we are divided and pulled apart. But there's a tremendous opportunity in overcoming the issue of diversity and making it a positive aspect of our life. And I think that no matter how we think about diversity, that the differences between us, whether they're racial or political or religious or national, all of those diverse differences of persons and of organizations and of entities is being broken down because of a variety of things that are happening in our environment and in the world today. And we believe that this breakdown of these divisions is a positive influence in this world and a positive influence in our lives. But because of our conditioning, because of our childhood, because of our belief systems, so many of us have to work very hard at embracing the ideas of diversity. Diversity in the workplace, diversity in the community, diversity in the church, diversity in the world. And as we work through the process of embracing this reality of diversity, it can become one of the most magnificent blessings that any generation has ever experienced. How is it that we're beginning to break these issues of difference down in the world? I think a great aspect of it has to do with communication. We have the television now, and we have movies, but especially we have television that is able to bring to us things that are happening in other parts of the world, in other cultures, and in other ways that we would never have even imagined or known of in the past. With this has come what many have called the information age, or the dynamic of computers and all of the aspects that we have to communicate with this entire global community, with the family of life that is resident on the whole planet. And of course, there's travel. And today we travel more than we ever have with all of the modes of transportation, but especially the wonder of airplanes and the ability to get from one place to another with such speed and rapidity. Communication and information and travel have made this world a smaller place. They have brought diverse persons and groups together. They have created within us an awareness and a knowledge that we never even imagined that we would have before. And in the creation of this new homogeneous environment and world, we are all called to have a different way of thinking about people, about circumstances, and about situations. It is an opportunity for us to embrace ideas of acceptance and tolerance. It's an opportunity for us, rather than to be divisive and divided, to be inclusive and unified, to understand others. And as we do that, it doesn't mean that we give up any part of ourselves or any part of our tradition or any part of our organization, but it does mean that we come to a new and different understanding and realization of what other people are, what other organizations are, what other nationalities are, and we become more informed and more educated and more aware persons because of it. There is a oneness of life. There is a unity of life, and it is no mistake that as we move through time and as we've come to where we are, the unity of all human life is becoming more profoundly real. And whether people want to accept it or not, the dynamic is that we are all becoming more of a human family, more unified, and more one with another. This calls us to look beyond our differences. In religion and spirituality, that has never been an easy issue. Spiritual people, religious people, have for so many centuries, from the beginning of time, fought over their belief systems. But what we're seeing today is the commonality of what we have in spirituality, the commonality of our religious richness in this planet, with the diversity of understanding and practice, a part of that diversity. It calls us to tolerance, it calls us to understanding, it calls us to embrace that which we believe, but to understand more fully and more deeply what others believe. A decade or 2 decades ago, our country was fighting with just the understanding of the difference between the Judeo-Christian ethic. We always talk so often about being a Christian country and a Christian nation, and yet in our midst always were people of the Jewish faith. And that emergence of faith was a struggle and a difficulty from an integration standpoint. But today, that dwarfs in terms of the kind of spiritual integration that we live in our environment, in our own community here, and certainly in our entire nation. We have an influx, a huge influx of Muslims, of Hindus, people from Eastern traditions. And all of this gives us an opportunity to become more acutely aware of what it is that we have in common and how few our differences are. And it's important for us, if we're going to be at peace, if we're going to be people of unity, if we're going to be truly spiritual individuals, that we understand others. And even though we may not embrace their concepts and ideas, that we respect that which they believe and that which they are, and we are able to draw upon the common realities of who and what we are. Ethnic differences have torn us apart for ages. All of the political differences, all of the differences that have divided us as a people are really crumbling. And that crumbling has brought, in many cases, an almost convulsive feeling because of the chaos that comes out of it, the anger and the difficulty. But out of that is coming a wonderful understanding of the diversity and the richness of diversity. There's an organization called Unity and Diversity, and we're certainly not promoting that organization on this program, nor are we a part of it. But the concept and the idea, simply those words put together, bring so much peace of mind and heart to each of us. Unity in diversity. What that means is to understand that we can be unified, we can be one with other people, even though we are diverse and different. We can preserve our own differences, our own traditions, our own belief systems, but we can draw upon some simple common ground that we all share. And if we begin to talk and operate from the common ground that we have with all persons, we begin to operate from a center of peace, a center of harmony, and a center of balance. And when we operate from a center of peace and harmony and balance, within our own hearts and within our own minds and within our own circle of friends and organizations and families and community, then the environment around us, indeed the entire world, changes because of that. What I'm talking about is changing one thought at a time, changing one person at a time, because the only real change that takes place in you and in me. And as we change as individuals, as we change the way that we think, we're able to change the entire world. We're able to change the entire feeling, or as we say, the vibration around us and the vibration within this world. And we all want peace, we all want harmony, and we all want balance. In New Thought metaphysical philosophy, there are three core tenets, and they are, we believe, common ground for people of all spiritual faiths everywhere. They are uncomplicated principles, and they are common and embraced by a multitude of faith traditions and belief systems. The first is that God and we are one. That premise simply says that whatever it is you think God is, whatever it is you call Him or name Him to be, whatever it is you believe to be divine, that we and the divine are one, that we are unified with that divine force. We have been unified with that divine force from the beginning of time, from the beginning of our existence, and we continue to be unified with that divine presence no matter what happens. Now, in circumstance and situation in your life and in my life, we may believe that we are detached from the presence of God or the presence of the divine, but in truth, we are not and have never been and will never be detached from that reality. The second issue of common ground is to live in the now, to live in the present moment. And all of us need to be aware of the reality that by living in the present moment, we are able to do the most for ourselves and for others. We are able to impact ourselves and others in the most positive and affirmative way. Very often we live in the past or we live in the future, and we do this in our minds. Living in the now has to do with a dynamic of mind and how mind acts and reacts. Whenever your mind or my mind is centered in the now, we are in the present moment, we are in the presence of the persons and people with whom we are able to deal in a positive and affirmative way with whatever is taking place. But as soon as our mind allows us to step into the past or to step into the future, As soon as our thought processes move into something that happened in the past or some remembrance or step into some anticipation of the future, we step out of the now. And when we step out of the now, we begin to divide. We begin to divide ourselves from others. We begin to divide ourselves from the present reality. We begin to move into another dimension. And so we need to be cautious and aware of the fact that living in the now is a point of common ground and something that keeps us from being divided or separated from other people. The third principle is a simple one that crosses all religious and spiritual, denominational and faith tradition lines, and that is the simple aspect and concept that we need to live love. Love as a concept and idea has to do with acceptance. It has to do with unconditional acceptance of others, of circumstance, of situation. And if we live love, we go beyond the idea of simply thinking about love, thinking about acceptance. We go beyond that process of thinking it and we live it. And when we live it, then the dynamic of our being changes. And so as we look at the common things that we have, the things that we have in common with other people, and as we embrace the rich diversity of others, we have so much to learn, and we have such a peaceful existence in which to live, to raise our families, to live our lives, and to learn the lessons that we need to learn. In truth, we believe that all of life has but one purpose, and that is to teach us the lessons that we need to learn. You and I and all of us are here to learn. We're here to learn lessons about ourselves, about our spiritual reality, about our spiritual being, and we are here to school our soul. And as we school our soul through the experiences of life, we learn lessons day by day. And in the schoolroom of life, which is this planet Earth and the life that you are living and that I am living, we have tremendous opportunities to embrace diversity, and in the midst of diversity, to stop the things that divide us, to stop the fighting and the difficulty, and to become one with all of those around us, and to become one with ourselves and with the presence and the power of God. I invite you to examine your life and to identify those things that divide you from other people, to identify those things in your life that you separate, in which you separate yourself from other people, and work hard at letting those things go, and instead centering upon the common ground of our unity of purpose, of the human condition and circumstance as a family, all connected and interconnected in this experience of life, which we believe to be positive, affirmative, and empowering. We believe in prayer and reflection, meditation. We'd like to invite you at this point in the program to pause for a moment of reflection with us. Eternal and loving God, we open our hearts and minds to the rich diversity of life that takes place upon all of this planet. Open our hearts and minds to embrace our unity of all persons. Help us to give up that which divides us and to embrace that which unifies us in our oneness with each other and our oneness with you. We ask and pray these things in the name of faith, in the name of hope, in the name of love. Amen.
We would like to give you the opportunity to explore and discover in your own home the new thought teachings that this program is sharing with you by sending you a free copy of one of these booklets. Simply address your request to Confident Living at P.O. Box 7726, Long Beach, California, 90807. Whatever your dream, whatever your vision, you can reach it through confident living.
That was very powerful, your talk about diversity. And isn't it exciting to know that we can go into life and face diversity and come out victorious?
Absolutely. And I think the great challenge that we have as religious people or spiritual people, I think religion in itself begins to divide us, but as spiritual people is to break down some of those walls and some of those negative aspects of life. Religions have been fighting for from the beginning of time, and it's kind of time that stopped. And some real exciting things are happening in a variety of faith traditions, but I think we need to go a lot farther so that we are embracing and working toward understanding and mutual respect of all persons of faith, regardless of the faith.
Indeed. And isn't it interesting that all religions point toward living in the now? One way or another, they point toward that, which is something you touched on so very beautifully in your talk.
I think every faith tradition does that, although what happens often is in the teaching, they get really centered in what happens after death. And of course, we believe in life after death, and we spend a fair amount of time talking about that. But living in the now and in the present moment is so tremendously important. And I think that if we spend a lot of our time talking about where we're going, or worse yet, one of the things that we see happen often in traditional Christian teaching is that there's just this awareness that life here is just so horrible and terrible, but if we can just get through it, that one day things will be better. The teaching really is that if we live in the now, and if we change the way that we think about circumstances and situations, then in fact we can have heaven on earth, and we can be in the kingdom of heaven, which Christ Jesus spoke about, not only after our life, but within this physical life. And that's not to say that that is uniquely Christian. There are many, many faiths that believe that as well.
Yes, but it's so apparent that that is true, that heaven is here on earth, and we make our own hell here on earth, conversely. And it's, again, it's what we make of life ourselves. It's how we see life, and then how we react to life, and then how we live out whatever it is we're living out.
Right. Every moment of our life is either heavenly or hellish or something in between, and can be either of those things based upon the way that we think about life. And it doesn't mean that the difficult or painful situations of life will just evaporate and go away. And I think we need to get over that. We need to get over the idea that anybody is entitled to a great and wonderful life in terms of the externals. And certainly we are entitled to a great and wonderful life, but it comes from us, from within us, and from the power that we have to draw upon the resource of the presence and power of God in us to deal with whatever's happening to us.
Exactly. And we all call to us whatever it is we need for our soul's growth. I know I have a very precious friend who's never had much adversity in her life, and now has faced critical cancer illness, and she's facing it with grace and charm, and she's going to come through this victoriously. And I think one reason she has it is because she's never had to face anything like this before, and she, in a sense, called it on herself, because she often says, you know, I've led a charmed life. I haven't had to face anything difficult in this lifetime, because everything worked out nicely. Her husband, her children, her husband's work, and she didn't need to work outside her home, but she did a lot of philanthropic work, and everything just was wonderful and perfect. And now she's had to face this, and she's seeing that too. So as we see clearly what it is we need to work through in life, it makes it a lot easier to work through it if we see that clearly.
That's absolutely true. And as we see these opportunities to overcome diversity, we're able to learn tremendous lessons. And for us as persons, and especially as spiritual persons, the opportunity to overcome diversity, or our prejudices, if you will, and those things that keep us separated, really bring us tremendous life lessons. And those life lessons can do nothing but strengthen us and make us stronger in our inner person.
Exactly. Of course, I believe, and I believe you do too, that before we're born, our high self and the Lord or angel of karma and our guardian angel helps us decide what we're going to accomplish in this particular earth life. And so we have that blueprint in our centers, heart center. And then as we live according to that blueprint, some of it will be great adversity, and there will be diversity there, but it's how we face those things that matter. And so that's why we have to face them, for our own soul's growth.
And I think that's borne out scripturally over and over again,
Yes.
because the most elect of God, and of course we're all the elect of God, and that again is something that divides us. But the most elect of God that we see in the scriptural stories and in the stories have great and awesome difficulties and
Yes.
struggles.
Yes.
And so they are able to deal with those circumstances and struggles in such a positive, wonderful way that they become overcomers because of it. And the demonstration of the power of God in them comes out so beautifully as a model for our lives. And so it isn't the avoidance of those lessons that we need to learn. Actually, what we need to do is to encourage that adversity and difficulty in our life so that we can draw from its richness and learn the lessons that we need to learn. But of course, we don't need to go seeking difficulty because it all comes into our life so often. And so as it comes into our life, then we're called to do something about it. But this issue of avoiding the things that divide us or separate us is just tremendously important.
Yes. Well, something you said now reminded me of a lady who came to my meditation meetings 25 years ago, and she kept having horrible things happen in her life. She and her two children went to Hawaii on holiday, and the car they rented, they had an accident in that car. They had several mishaps, both on their holiday and in their home. And I said to her, there's some reason. Can you see what it is, why you're having all this adversity? And she said, yes, I asked for all my karma at one time. And so she was really getting a lot of adverse karma at one time. So we can live life without asking for the worst, because as you said, we're going to have a balance. We're going to have good things happen and bad things happen, but good and bad are just figures of speech, because it can all be turned to the good.
Absolutely, and we can see good in all of it, even though we see that good sometimes through our tears.
Yes.
And yet, as we're able to see good through our tears, we're able to deal in a totally different way with whatever the circumstance or situation is. If we just live in the tears,
Yes.
then we just are more and more defeated and overcome by the circumstances.
And fear of death is the greatest fear that people have, so the psychologists tell us. And it's really not to be feared, because all religions teach that when we go over in death, we're going to something much better than here. So if we believe in the religions at all, our own or others, then we're not going to be fearful. And you teach that so beautifully in all the things that in all of your work, that death is not to be feared. Death is to be welcomed, and it's a welcome respite.
It's a welcome respite, and it's a reality for all of us. And we do spend a lot of time in the ministry talking about death and the preparation for death and the fact that it is not to be feared. And I think it is the ultimate divisor or separator of us, because we believe that those who have died are totally separated from us. And of course, we believe so often that the things we can't see don't exist. And we know, of course, that that's not true at all. And so if we are really going to overcome diversity, or if we're going to overcome our negative feelings about diversity, and if we are really going to embrace our unity in diversity, then we are unified completely and totally with those people that have made that transition. And there is no division between the living and the dead, or those who are in physical form and those who are in totally spiritual form. And I think that's an important concept to understand when we look at diversity, because there's a diversity of life. Some of us are 17 and handsome or beautiful. Others of us are a little farther along in the process. And so, but yet the person, the appearance is changing, but the real inner person hasn't changed. And so that diversity just brings richness to our lives. And so we need to look at diversity as that aspect of richness that unifies us, and see beyond what divides us, and again come back to what is common and the common ground that unifies us.
Yes, and that keeps us whole within ourselves, so that we are a whole-centered person. And I know I used to think you have to be happily married, you have to have a relationship, you have to have this and that to be happy. Well, that's not true. We have to be happy within ourselves before we can give out positively in any kind of relationship, whether it's work, personal, or any other aspect of life.
And just as you said so beautifully, we have to be whole.
Right.
And if we are whole, then we are in unity with ourselves. And when we go beyond ourselves, we need to be whole with all other persons. We need to be the whole of humanity, if you will, together.
And you know what? We have to dare to express ourselves the way we truly are. I've been a part of a group that's revising some legal papers, and it's really interesting how some people are afraid to speak out because they're afraid they're going to offend someone else. And that is so short-sighted, because we need to express what's coming from inside ourselves without being judgmental of others, but just to be expressive.
And we need to express our diversity.
Exactly.
And out of our diversity comes richness. And then out of that diversity, we are called to oneness or unity. So the wonder of diversity is that it doesn't pull us apart, it should pull us together. And yet we see diversity so often pulling us apart. Well, Dr. Freelander and I have been sharing with you concepts for confident living and talking to you about the diversity of life. And we hope that you will look at those things that divide you from others and separate you from others and embrace the things that unify you and make you whole and one with all of life around you. We look forward to seeing you next time.
This program is a community outreach of Christ Church. Dr. Mike Costello speaks each Sunday morning at 11 a.m. and Dr. Iris Freelander speaks on Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. at the church. On Sunday evenings at 6 p.m., there is a meditation and healing service. Come and join us. You will be warmly welcomed.